Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we've seen Megalopolis, or as it's shown on screen when the title card comes up, Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis, A Fable. The film's been in the making for 40 years. He's been wanting to make it. He had a false start in, I think, 89, and then I think he had to kind of do, because I think his films hadn't been successful, so he had to do studio stuff to make up for that. And then in 2001, he was shooting, or he got a cinematographer, Ron Frick, I think his name is, or Ron Fricke, who shot Koyanis Katsi, to shoot time-lapse stuff of New York. And then obviously 9/11 happened, and that put paid to continuing production then. And since 1997, when he made The Rainmaker, he's only made 3 other films. None of them have been big, none of them have been particularly successful. And he always said, kind of, basically, I'm going to have to pay for this myself. And to the point where he sold part of his very successful winery to fund this. And the budget is reported at $120 million, which is basically $120 million of his own money, plus marketing and Christ knows what else, you know. So this is kind of this huge, decades in the making passion project that has finally come out. Like, you always kind of thought maybe, you know, you always thought it never would, to be honest. It finally has. We saw it in the IMAX Digital in Birmingham. What did you think?
I loved it. I mean, I think some of the response is upsetting to me, the way that people have responded. I mean,
I agree.
I remember Victor Perkins, my colleague. He always says, you know, the film is almost certainly always smarter than you, right? And that's because it's collective, because it's made by all these people who are really the top people in their field. Yeah, so kind of however much you think you're superior to the film, kind of stand back and have another think. And personally, I felt we were lucky to see this. I mean, I mean, I do have problems with it, but I also think it's a real artist's work. I think it was dazzling to see. We were so lucky to see it in IMAX. It's so long since I've seen a film that is full of eye protein, you know, of things that nourish the eye, that are expressive, that are kind of unusual, that are rich. All the images are like densely textured, and, you know, everything from the background to the conception to the costuming, you know, it just feels like so rich to me. I mean, I can't say, you know, that I figured it all out or that I know exactly kind of what everything means. But also, I was never quite lost in the narrative. I mean, I was able to follow it quite easily.
One of the criticisms I've seen people making of this is that it's plotless. And I just think, what do you need from a film to tell you what its plot is? Like, it's quite obvious what this plot is. It follows in chronological order. You know, it has several strands and quite a lot of characters, and they go in various directions, but it's never complicated.
No.
You know. So fundamentally, it's about Caesar Catalina, who's played by Adam Driver, who is an architect, but he seems to be, you know, he's a polymath, all sorts, and he's got a Nobel Prize for the discovery and development of this material called megalon, I think, which is the kind of fantastical new material that he's going to be building. He wants to build his new metropolis on, his megalopolis, and he sees it as the future. It's a city for the future. It will reimagine the way that society, it's for the people, that kind of thing. He has to fight against the mayor, played by Giancarlo Esposito, in order to do this. And the film is kind of fundamentally very, very Roman. It takes the Roman epic and puts it in modern day America. And I mean, it's interesting to think about the film having this 40-year history, because I was kind of thinking, the America that you see, the way it's conceptualized is you know, it's kind of sci-fi and stuff, but it's essentially, I don't imagine it being any different to the way it might have been in 1983 when the idea came up, because the Roman epic that is kind of built into it is classical, and it's just a story that comes back and comes back and comes back. Like, the America is kind of not all that different. I mean, the cars are a bit different. That's kind of it.
It's all shot in a 1930s Art Deco style.
Yeah.
Which I think is also interesting and resonant, because, of course, that was the height of the Great Depression, right? So this idea of like the super rich and the starving hordes, and kind of both has a kind of a futuristic dimension, but also, harkens back to one of those crisis moments in American history, really, which is obviously one of the themes of the film. That kind of we're headed for destruction unless we do something about it.
Right, it's basically talking about the fall of America and the fall of Rome. And indeed, the America in this film is now called New Rome. And that's the whole country. And the country is essentially shown to us as New York. I mean, the Chrysler Building's still there. So like it's recognisable as New York. But it's being kind of readapted. All the characters' names are Roman names, all versions of Roman names. And people are wearing togas and things. So like, it's kind of funny to think about how America turned into this Roman version. It's not explained in the film. You don't get the history of New Rome. It's just like it's an alternate kind of version, I guess. But it is kind of interesting to see. It feels like I was kind of imagining it as the people made a decision to reenact Rome in the modern day somehow. And that's kind of how it goes. But then, if you're going to reenact Rome, you're going to bring about a Roman fall. And the question is, how do you rebuild after that? And that's what this Adam Driver's character has, his great vision for. And, one of the other things that I've seen people saying, which, again, I thought, I'm sure this is not going to be what it is. And it's not. Is they were talking about it being Randian, right? Like Ayn Rand. And the comparison is obvious with the Fountainhead.
Yeah.
The architect with the great vision for society who has to fight everyone in order to
There is
forge
that
his way.
element, for sure.
It's absolutely there, except that the underlying philosophies are completely different. Francis Ford Coppola ends this film with a pledge of allegiance to the human race. Ayn Rand would have hit the roof.
Yes.
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 It's completely different. And the idea of his city, of Adam Driver's city, is for the people. It's to build a better society. And the idea of Ayn Rand's city, or I forget, was it Rourke's city in the Fountainhead, was the separation and so on. The people who deserve it and the people who don't. It's completely different.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the interests, I just thought it's a sad state of affairs that criticism is so poor, that instead of finding a way to get audiences to see this film, which is unusual, it's not what people are used to, right? But it's a daring kind of experiment by a great filmmaker who I think kind of deserves a kind of a respect to just kind of, listen and think and see, right? And it's almost like this attitude that if somehow a film doesn't fit, what your current conception is, as if it isn't kind of, pleasing you in this easily digestible ways that you're now used to, that there's something wrong with the film, rather than, in fact, maybe there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
That kind of, you're not open. And I think part of the problem with the film is that it definitely tries to be art. There's no question. Yeah. And I think, the narrative is unusual, and I think more importantly, it's very visual. And I sometimes, think that people no longer know how to see films, right? And I think Brian De Palma was saying, well, part of the problem now is that kind of everything is almost like radio with pictures, and that a lot of this kind of Netflix kind of, series, that's what it is. It's like kind of radio with pictures. I wouldn't go that far, but it's certainly true that what you get, or what we're used to, if that becomes kind of the norm, if what we're used to seeing is kind of long form television, if that is now the dominant, it's a style of filmmaking that does very little with images. That it often doesn't symbolize, it doesn't kind of use metaphor, it kind of, it doesn't use kind of things that almost vibrate in the body, like color or split screen, or all the things that Coppola is doing in this film, or the creation of striking images, that are meant to kind of convey something maybe unconscious or something, that isn't easily spelled out. All of the Netflix series are really about plot.
Yeah.
And it's focused on plot and on telling you the story through plot.
And I'm telling you again and again and again, because if you're on your phone, you're not really watching it. And when you come back to it, you need to be reminded.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the idea of, what you say about De Palma saying it's radio with pictures, I don't think it's... you probably shouldn't be as dismissive of that phrase as you are a little bit. Because historically, TV kind of came out of radio. And there is a thing in TV called glance theory, which is about, the idea that people don't watch TV with their whole attention. They are doing other things. And this comes from way before phones.
Sure.
It comes from, you're cooking or whatever. It's on in the background. And so it is like a lot more of the information that is fundamental to TV is audio.
Well, the reason why I had reservations, because I actually do think that long-form television is... and, some of my colleagues will kill me for saying this, but it's what I think. That it's also not traditional television, right? So I think
it's certainly changed.
Yeah. So I think it does use kind of a lot more visual devices, a lot more kind of rhythmic devices. It's kind of, it tells stories in a different way than traditional television did, right? So, but it's also, it's not cinema and it's not television. It's something else, and kind of, and something that's become the dominant. But nonetheless, I think it doesn't draw. I mean, you put it. It doesn't draw your full attention, and certainly it doesn't draw your full attention in terms of what Richard Dyer calls non-representational signs. Yeah, things that in cinema are captivating, like the intensity of a color or costuming or rhythm. Right, all the various ways that kind of cinema can signify and tell a story that don't involve dialogue.
All of which is enormously in play in this film.
Absolutely.
Particularly, I think, when it comes to actually, you could pick out on anything, but editing is really striking in this film. There's so much montage. So spoilers. But when Caesar is shot, comes out of nowhere, huge shock. I mean, it was a proper, like, you didn't jump nearly as much as I thought you were. I jumped more than you, which is a huge surprise in itself. But what follows is this incredible montage of him immediately being, kind of cured, or cured of death, sort of revived and saved with the use of his material, Megalon, in amongst other imagery, and everything moves so fluidly. The music beneath everything keeps everything moving so fast, and the whole way through. Again, this is something else I saw someone say, that it's like, they said it's like a 2 hour 20-minute film that feels like it's 3.5 hours and feels like it should have been 5 hours. And I was going, no. Like, it didn't feel... I mean, it felt its length, but it didn't feel long. It moved so fast, and everything was going at such a lick, and I never knew when it was going to end or where it was going to go. And I was constantly... like, sometimes when a film does that, it lulls, and I'm going, okay, where is this going? Not this one. I was constantly excited to see what was going to happen next.
Me too. I mean, I didn't look at my watch once. I wasn't bored, for a single minute. I was tempted, and this is interesting, I think, I was tempted at some point to look, just because I wanted to know how close we were to the end, kind of to get, a sense of where the narrative might turn. And then I was too afraid to look at my watch because I didn't want to lose attention to what was happening on screen.
Yeah.
Right? It was that riveting and that interesting, right? So, I think kind of, maybe people haven't learned or have forgotten how to watch movies, because there are problems with this film, because I have reservations about Coppola's ideas of the world, the future, the family, relationships, gender. There are things that in a way feel very old-fashioned, right?
He's 85, I think.
Sorry?
He's an 85-year-old man, I think.
I know.
I mean, I'm just saying.
So, but those would be my reservations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, on the one hand, I do think he's one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, and you can see it in this film. Actually, you can see what makes him a great filmmaker. On the other hand, it does seem, that some of the ideas in the film are the ideas of a man of a certain age. Which actually, in that sense, I also have no problem with that. I think what artists do is they express themselves and their worldview. And he is a man, and he is of a certain age. And, so in that sense, I don't have, so I have problems with the film. I don't have problems that those are the ideas expressed. I just also kind of, that is a limit, I think, on kind of.
But
my
you wish you had
appreciation.
better ideas or more progressive
do.
ideas. I mean, what are the kind of things you're talking about being an issue?
Well, the thing where Adam Driver says, well, in my new republic or something, a marriage will be sacrosanct or something.
Yeah, she asks him, what's the most important thing in your idea? Something like that. And he says marriage.
Yeah.
You go, that feels a bit for him. I don't know.
Well, I mean, maybe that's his life because, he's clearly, I mean, the film is dedicated to his wife.
Oh, no, I didn't mean for Francis Ford Coppola. I meant for the Adam Driver character. But I mean, his wife is obviously extremely important to him. As we see, he goes to visit her ghost.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So, I mean, but there are different ways of expressing that, of you could say love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas I think he means marriage as a kind of a consecration of love or something. Right?
Yeah, we also have this thing about the family unit and having the baby together, and the baby is the final image of the film that represents the future that this is all meant for.
That's right. And the birth of a baby is what transforms everything. And of course, you can understand that. I mean, but it does feel like both overly traditional and somewhat exclusive in the present time. Yeah, there are also things that the villain, hugely entertaining. What's his name?
Giancarlo Esposito.
No.
Shia LaBeouf.
Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah.
Who I think is fantastic.
He's wonderful.
Yeah. But nonetheless, the conceptualization of that character, of the villainous character, who wears drag through like half of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is a kind of a very. It has consequences that I'm sure kind of Coppola didn't think through or didn't intend, because that is also quite a traditional negative stereotype of, I mean, I don't think there's a suggestion that he's gay in the film, though he might be. Yeah, but kind of, cross-dressing or trans as a kind of a shorthand for evil. Yeah.
Well, it's just a kind of, it plays as a diminishment of the character, of his status, of his masculinity.
Yes.
But I think it is kind of, I think he plays it as, I mean, he plays it with all the good humour. Like, he says it's a prank for whatever, like his fraternity.
Yes.
But at no point is the character kind of embarrassed by being in drag or anything. He's happy as Larry. So there is that kind of, so I think that maybe slightly modulates it. But
well, I don't think so. I mean, there's a whole tradition of associating, that kind of, I mean, in Visconti's, what's it, with the La Casa de Glay, you have Helmut Berger and, dressed as Marlene Dietrich, right? And, so he becomes kind of like the symbol of fascism and decadence and the destruction of civilization. And you have kind of similar associations here. I think, I mean, I would have loved to have seen those character traits in some other character, right? But to kind of combine that as part of the evilness of Shia LaBeouf, I think, is a mistake.
I think I also had a bit of a problem with the two main female characters.
Indeed.
Essentially being completely underwritten. Although I didn't, find them not entertaining. I mean, I think Aubrey Plaza,
yeah.
Aubrey Plaza, who plays this sort of TV sort of reporter. I mean, the film has a lot of kind of TV culture imagery. And the way the news is kind of presented. Again, something that made me think, is this really all that different between modern America and 40 years ago America? Probably not, But she finagles her way into the Horse of Power, into a marriage with the incredibly powerful figure played by John Voight. And she, her character and the actress opens up into this sexually devious, manipulative woman and she has this incredible scene, I thought, with Shia LaBeouf. It got me so hot. Oh god, he was so fucking sexy. Oh wow. But that's like it's also a very narrow character, really.
Yes.
And I think the character played by Natalie Emmanuel, who is the mayor's daughter, who falls in love with Adam Driver, and they have the child together, is even more narrowly written. I mean, that point where they've fallen in love and he's having a new kind of artistic unleashment. He's been inspired by it, and he says, you inspire me and all my patience comes from you and all my good things come from you. And it's like, that is just. But you're the great man who gets to do all the thinking and imagining, and she's the woman who gets to be. I enabled that somehow.
Yeah.
Like
it's a problem. Even though kind of the supporting characters, i.e., the mothers. Yeah, so it's again kind of a problem, but the mothers are a lot more interesting, right? And particularly Talia Shire, who I just love watching, really. And which brings me to another element, because I haven't read reviews of the film, but I did read a lot of Twitter commentary, right? And you think kind of nobody in any of what I read, nobody mentioned that, it's got Jon Voight, who's great. Yeah, kind of teaming up with Dustin Hoffman, I think for the first time since Midnight Cowboy, right? Like, they're kind of like a classic pairing. It's amazing to see them in the same frame together. It's like, if you're a cinephile, that's a kind of a cinephile pleasure of its own, right? And then also to see Talia Shire, right? Who is fantastic. And of course, who's his sister, is Coppola's sister. So there's a family affair with that and Jason Schwartzman and all of that. But actually there's also a kind of a memory trace of an Ev, yeah? And, to see Lawrence Fishburne, right? I mean, you see him in Apocalypse Now as a teenager, you see him now as an old man. I mean, kind of, those are real, for me, cinephile pleasures, yeah? Like, those are the things that the film is offering you, really. And it's offering kind of really interesting parts to them. I mean, I think this must be the best part that Jon Voight's had in ages, and he's terrific. Which
is kind of interesting because there's so much Trump in that character.
Yes.
And Jon Voight is a big fan of Trump, and from what I understand, he was kind of assured that that's not what the character was going to be doing, and so he may have sort of slightly gone against what he thought. But he's great in it.
He's great in it, and he's given an out, because he ends up being the generous benefactor.
Yeah.
But certainly through 90% of it, he is a Trumpian character. Right?
Yeah. Well, but it's done with a joke, though. Like by giving all this money in my dying moments, I will become the benefactor everyone loves. In a sense, and we see an image of a statue of him. So, like, it's. I mean, the film is really funny. Really funny. It's got loads of good jokes and loads of it. Again, this is something that I saw people saying is they were basically taking the piss out of what they saw as bad performances, bad dialogue. And I thought, no. This is the one thing that people tend to say about a film like this is that it's messy.
Yes.
And I think what that kind of implies is that the film got away from the director. And this did not get away from the director. Everything that's gone on in here, even if it's been, obviously it's all been invented on the way because that's what creative process is. But like, this is the film he wanted to make.
Yes. And actually, it's a film I love because actually I think those performances that are slightly OTT, like Shia LaBeouf and like Aubrey Plaza, they bring this pulpy energy and life, like a pulsating energy to what is kind of a challenging film. It's a film, that has a lot of imagery, that is quite kind of symbolic, that is asking you to kind of pay attention to, the design of, a kind of a composition or something, right? Like, and really, really beautiful it is, right? But then you have these characters walking through it that really, I think, are just pulsating with life and are funny and, kind of, it brings kind of a melodrama or a melodramatic dimension to what is, in many ways, a kind of an experimental art film, like visually it is, right?
Yeah.
So I loved it.
Adam Driver has some of those performance moments too. I mean, with that when he first meets Natalie Emmanuel's character, what is her name, Julia, or she visits him. It's fine. And there's a long take. The camera moves and it constantly is racking focus. I noticed it and I thought, this is great. This is like really technical, accomplished, like confident stuff. They're not just cutting. It's moving and reframing and racking focus at just the right time. It's doing all the right things. I loved it. And then there's the point where she's about to leave, or I think she's kind of constantly about to leave and arguing in that scene. But he has this line, being dismissive of her 1 year of medical training, and he goes, "Go back to the club," and he says it like that. Or he says it better than that, and he kind of moves his head. And people have been like really mocking this particular line. And I'm like, no, that is great. It works with the character. He's incredibly arrogant. He's dismissive of her. That's what that head shake. That's what that line delivery says. There's a bit also. It's slightly earlier in that scene where she says, "Why do you read gossip columns?" And she comes in like like gossiping herself, right? Like whispering, why do you read gossip columns? And he like mocks her by doing the same thing, going, because they're interesting, or something like that. And it's like, he's taking the piss, right? That's in the character. Like when he's doing shit like that, he's performing, and like it's the character performing. Because then also there are other times when he's not doing that, like when he's up on the beams, which is the scene where they fall in love.
A beautiful scene.
And he's incredibly subdued. And that had that fantastic thing about him losing the ability to stop time. So we've seen him at the start stop time, and it comes back to him, and it's this wonderful, like, it's never explained why he can stop time. It's never explained really quite how real it is, but it certainly is, because she can see it happen. But like other people can't, and there's no rule explained as to who stops and who doesn't, because when he stops the building falling down, all the people watching it stop except for her. Is she special? It's not explained. Doesn't need to be explained. It just operates in your mind, right? And he loses the ability to stop time, and it's like it's crushing for him, and it's basically like it's the artistic flair has gone somehow, and then she is the one who reignites her at that point, as we said. But that is a wonderful. I mean, that shot of the two of them kissing when they're between the beams,
it's beautiful,
and she drops the rose and it hangs in midair because time stopped at that point. Amazing. Like it's like just, there's so much imagination in the shots in this, in the visual ideas.
I mean, you think, what kind of dumbos are responding to this film? And actually it's an ambitious film, right? Because the film is deliberately upfront about being about time, about consciousness, about progress, about utopias, about fascism, about capitalism. These are some of the most complex kind of, or the important and complex kind of issues of our time. And yet no one is criticizing the film because it's dealing with those issues badly or poorly or stupidly, or it's almost like all they're saying is, it doesn't make sense, like it doesn't have a story. Well, like,
it seems silly to me.
Right?
I've seen some comparisons to Jupiter Ascending, the Wachowski's film. And it's mainly disparaging comparisons. Again, the dialogue's stupid. This is silly, but I mean that's another film I really loved.
I loved it as well.
There's a film that takes really big swings and does some interesting things and has some interesting line readings of its own. You remember the bit where Mila Kunis, she fancies the hell out of Channing Tatum's character. And he says, but I'm half dog, it would never work between us because she's royalty and I'm a dog. And she goes, I love dogs.
I remember that.
Great, it's so good. And it's like, it's silly and it's funny and it's meant to be. And it's also kind of heartbreaking at the same time. It works, right? That's going on in here. But actually the film that this film really reminded me of was Southland Tales. I don't know if you remember, we watched it together.
Okay, I don't remember it.
So we'd seen it on the podcast. It was, I can't remember the director's name, but he made Donnie Darko. And this was Richard Kelly. Richard Kelly. And this was his next film after that in about 2007, 8, something like that. And it was, very badly received, essentially. But it was hugely ambitious. It was very much set in a place. I mean, that really made me think of it. This is like this is this New York, this New Rome, New York thing. And it's like it's all about the place. It only makes sense as a film about what this place is and what it means. And it was set in a kind of alternate reality, alternate near future kind of thing. It also had kind of Miles magic in it, as this film does with time stopping. And it's a film that's about, it's a kind of state of America film, which I think this kind of is. Yes. Talking about the culture and talking about the politics and talking about the way people act and the way society's built. That's what both those films are doing. And it's just as sad that film didn't get the... Because that's not a perfect film either, by any means, and we said so when we saw it. But it's just as sad that film didn't get the recognition it really deserved, as this one currently isn't. I mean, people are also talking about the fact this has only made like $4 million. And it's like, I don't think... okay, sure, it would be great if this film made $120 million back. I'm not sure someone made this film to make $120 million. They made it because it needed to be made. They wanted to make it. They had something to say.
Yes. And actually, I would tell people, go see it now, because you'll never see it again in this way. So beautiful in the IMAX, with that density of color and that texture, And I do also think that, whatever you think, this is a film that gives you so much more than your average film. So it might not be as neatly contained. It might not give you the easy pleasures. But, if you believe that film can be art at all, this is a film that I think is art. It's trying to express. It's trying to express complex ideas. It's making you think. It's kind of giving you beauty, like, you know. So, you know, why people would want to deny themselves this experience, right? And why, even worse, they would want to deny other people this experience. I simply don't understand.
I mean, it does fundamentally tell me that we both need to spend a lot less time on Twitter, because that's where we're seeing all this shit, and we don't need to. And we would have seen this film anyway.
Well, you know, friends on Facebook were like so dismissive as well.
Yeah.
So it's not just kind of Twitter. It is also Facebook friends, some of whom are film academics, in fact. You know, so it's not just that. Another point I wanted to pick up on, because one of these friends on Facebook said, I don't understand the appeal of Adam Driver at all. And you think, really? Because one of the things, I wonder also to what extent watching him, you know, on film, because, you know, there were moments in this where he's just so sexy, right? Kind of, you know, that bit where he's half naked with the blood trailing. And there is something just about the massiveness of his body, right? And, you know, when he's embracing the woman he'll have a baby with.
Julia.
And you just see his hands. And his hands are almost like bigger than her head, right? And there's just something about, you know, the size, the weightiness, and the lightness. So there's all of that plus a fluidity in walking, right, that I think is very sexy.
There is something to be said about Adam Driver that I'd love him, and I think he's a real film fans actor. You know, he works with great directors. He has very interesting films in his filmography.
Yes,
but it's also true that he has very few hits.
True.
So The Last Duel was a big flop. House of Gucci made twice its budget.
Yes.
Ferrari wasn't particularly.
Wasn't a hit.
It wasn't a hit. And basically going back, he doesn't have. You know, you've got the Star Wars films.
Yes.
And he's great in those, but he's part of Star Wars. Star Wars sells itself, right? So I'm not saying like he's not partially responsible for the gross, but it's Star Wars. Apart from that, he's an incredibly recognisable face, and if you're a film person, then I think you're excited by him. But he doesn't have that star draw, which is interesting.
He doesn't. Though, you know, he did become a star on television in Girls. And I think people loved him in that. And he's very appealing in that. And actually, I think he's never quite played a character like that. He's played, you know, it's very difficult to love the guy in The Missionary, right? Like, you know, that ascetic kind of priest. He's chosen roles that kind of...
Silence, wasn't it?
Or The Silence,
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, he's chosen roles that are not kind of going to develop a career as a film star, that's for sure. Right? As you said, he's chosen the directors and the offbeat projects and so on. Those are not the grounds in which you build a movie star career and become a draw. But I think he's very magnetic. I think he does have kind of like a star presence. He's definitely unique. And I think he's a very good actor.
Yeah. I don't mean it as a particular criticism of the guy, and maybe he could have picked, you know, if he tried to build a movie star career, he wouldn't have picked the same films, roles, as you say. But I think it is interesting that, like, I think his popularity with us is not the same as his popularity with the wider world.
Yeah, he's not a draw.
Yeah,
he's not a box office draw, that's for sure.
And he is being asked to open a $120 million film here. So.
Yes.
Yeah. But like I say, you know.
Yes, well, you know, they should have got
Tom Cruise,
Ben Affleck or something. You know, it's not as if Ben Affleck has been opening films recently either. I mean, actually,
I didn't mention Ben Affleck.
No. Well, what I'm saying is that very few movie stars can now open a film in the traditional sense. I mean, you know, kind of.
Maybe so.
So, I mean, we'll see. But anyway,
it certainly feels like the actors who do are kind of a generation that did 10, 20 years ago. You know, the Tom Cruises and Brad Pitts were doing it 20 years ago, and they're still having to do it now. And where are the new ones? Not so much.
Well, I think, what's his name? That Texan actor in Twister. I think he's a draw.
Glenn...
Yeah.
Something. He's getting... Glenn Powell, is it?
Yes, exactly, Glenn Powell.
He seems to be popular at the minute. But actually, I think the women seem to have more of the draw in that today. Sydney Sweeney is, you know, massive. and
we've struck.
I was going to say Jennifer, what's her name? But she stopped, didn't she? And then she
Jennifer who?
What's up? Hunger Games. Jennifer Lawrence.
Oh, Jennifer Lawrence.
She's massive, and she could if she did again, but she seems to have stopped.
She's had babies. She stopped for
to
have children, I think. Anyway, I think my overall feeling about this film is that it's an experience I loved. I loved watching this film, even though I'm not sure I love the film, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So I think I love the experience of seeing it. I think it looks magnificent. It was, it was a real experience to see, and I'm very glad of it. It's a film that I think has flaws, and it's not my idea of a great film, because I think those flaws are substantial. I mean, I wonder, if, for all its vaunted kind of seriousness of intent and it's dealing with major issues, my suspicion is that once you begin to unravel what the film says about those serious issues, that actually it would kind of not stand up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't put any kind of great stock in the idea of the big issues, but I think it has real clarity of purpose, even though its purpose is also kind of multifaceted, and kind of very kind of wide at some points, because it is picking up on all sorts of areas of society, some of which it's not developed all that well. Like, for instance, the neighbourhood that's being torn down, for the Megalopolis to replace is the people being evicted are kind of essentially a pretty amorphous mob of just immigrant faces that don't really get much of a voice. It's
another of my problems with the film.
Yeah, exactly. So like,
you have the masses and they're all amorphous, and there's not a single kind of character that absolutely. You can pick out from the masses. I mean, that is a very elitist way of looking at that issue. Yeah. Right.
And I can sort of see what that criticism was saying when it said it felt like there was 5 hours of stuff, but it was cut. Because it feels like that it's light on detail in some respects, but I think I don't think it needs that. It's like what you talk about when you talk about films operating like poetry. Yes. Like a 7-series TV show is like a novel with all the detail and all the plots explain absolutely everything. And the film's only got 2 hours, 2.5 hours to do that. It has to condense.
That's right.
What's happening.
And when I was talking about HBO and so on, I wasn't, or indeed television. It's not that I'm saying that cinema is a greater medium. I'm not saying that. I don't believe that, but I do think it's a very different one. Yeah, I think it kind of conveys meaning differently, right? And I think that thing of it being condensed. And it being symbolic and allegorical and so on is, part of what the best films do. And I think it's what this one does.
Yeah, and using all of your senses all at once. Like you say, it's not just going, the plot is the important thing and that's all that matters. Like, everything matters, and you just have to pay attention. We should also quickly mention, not that I think anyone was wondering, we didn't see this with a live performer asking the question. This thing about the live performer that's in some screenings?
No.
So one of the kind of inventive aspects of this film is that the scene towards the end where, do you remember the screen kind of shrank and it was just at the very bottom of the screen, it was Adam Driver answering a question from a reporter.
Yes.
So I think the reason that was small, it seemed weird, was that in some screenings, the idea is, I think the idea was meant for all of them, but it's never going to happen, is that a real person, I have seen clips of this happening, in the, like a member of staff at the cinema gets up at a microphone and asks that question of Caesar,
right,
and he answers it. So there's this played interaction between reality and the screen. And obviously what we saw is just the answers, that the question is asked off screen. I don't know why the screen was so small though, because even when I've seen it, I've seen clips of it being done in real life and it was full screen, so I don't know what's going on. But we didn't see it with that. That is being sold as like the ultimate experience or something. And I think, I would be interested to know how it would come across. I think it would probably come across as quite silly. and that may be one of the things that people are mocking it for, saying this is dumb. But it's one of the ways. I mean, Francis Ford Coppola, when he was making One from the Heart, which was in 1982, he had this idea of live cinema. I think that's never really gone away. But the idea that it would be, it sounds like a live play, but I think someone's asked him this before, and he was like, "No, it's not like a play at all." But you mix and you shoot and you change the sets and everything live all at the same time. You shoot with multiple cameras. It feels like vision mixing a filmed play. That's again, like I say, what it sounds like. And that was supposed to happen for One from the Heart, and he kind of devoted all this money and time to building the Las Vegas Strip in a soundstage, and it never all came off. And I think that's one of the reasons that he's had sort of money troubles over the years. But he has had this long-standing ambition, it seems, to change what cinema looks and feels and sounds like.
Well, this is also why I feel, why would anyone want to deny themselves this experience, right? Like, it's great, it looks fantastic, it feels like you're seeing a real movie. One of my complaints about recent cinema is how often the frame feels empty. Yeah, that kind of, you realize that people are working with lower budgets, or when they're working with higher budgets, it's all CGI, right? So, this sense of having like a density of image and a frame that's filled, either with people or with objects or with things that express, right? This feels so rich, in those ways. And also there's something about the luminosity and, kind of the richness of the image. It's such a visual treat, really. And my feeling is that, if you wait too long, you won't be able to see it in this way. You'll end up seeing it on Blu-ray or something, right?
Or streaming, which is even worse.
Or streaming, which is worse. Yeah, but this idea of, being able to see kind of this work in IMAX, it's like, go,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Real kind of reinvigorating movie. So much better than so much of the shites I've watched lately.
Exactly. So
even if you don't agree, and you don't agree with the guy, and you don't agree with the politics or whatever it might be, it doesn't matter. Just it's such a vision.
It is.
I mean, so many of the lines in the film when they're talking about the importance of following a vision or that kind of thing, I completely feel like Francis Ford Coppola talking about himself.
Sure.
There's a line I think that Julia has about wanting to be in the insane column or something like that. And it's like, that's exactly what this film... That's him talking to you as himself.
Yes. Yes, it's that Marcus Aurelius quote.
Yeah.
That they give. So
it's great.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and YouTube Music. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social. And the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.